Hi there, my name is Yuval Anafi. I'm a product owner for SAP Business Application Studio, and welcome to our session on developing full-stack applications in SAP Business Application Studio. Before we start, I will give you a short introduction on SAP Intelligent Enterprise and SAP Business Technology Platform. So SAP Intelligent Enterprise aims to enable every enterprise to become an intelligent, sustainable enterprise. And SAP Business Technology Platform, which is SAP BTP, is the foundation of the intelligent, sustainable enterprise. It is compounded out of different components with tools and services like application development, automation, integration, data and analytics, and AI. Each one of these components of the SAP BTP offers a set of tools and services for your runtime and design time needs. Today, as I said, we will focus on the application development offering, and more specifically on the professional developer services with SAP Business Application Studio. So SAP Business Application Studio aims to provide the highest productivity for the professional developer on SAP Business Technology Platform. It aims to harmonize the different SAP opinionated technologies for your end-to-end development experience, like the SAP UI5, the mobile development kit, Fiori elements, CI/CD, events, SAP HANA, and the different runtime components, all tailored for an end-to-end development experience harmonized in SAP Business Application Studio. During TechEd, we'll be announcing several news around the professional developer offering on SAP BTP, around the development environment, user experience, and SAP Cloud Application Programming Model. When looking on the development environment news, first of all, we'll be releasing the SAP API Business Hub Enterprise consumption with SAP Business Application Studio with one-click experience out of the box. We'll also announce the availability of SAP Business Application Studio on top of the Microsoft Code open source. And last, we'll also announce around the integration with SAP Opinionated Services for continuous integration and delivery, and the SAP Personal Data Manager. The agenda for today, first of all, I will give a bit of an overview of the high productivity tools for developing full-stack applications in SAP Business Application Studio. And then we'll deep dive into a use case of developing capital expenditure application, and of course, a live product demo. So let's start with a bit of an overview of the high productivity approach in SAP Business Application Studio. So in SAP Business Application Studio, when, of course, developers will get out-of-the-box visual development environment tailored for developing business applications. And then whenever the developer needs, we'll also provide intuitive path from the visual tools into the standard professional developer tools. So whenever the developer feels a need to switch from the visual tools to the textual editors and the terminal, he'll be able to do that very easily with SAP Business Application Studio. On top of that, we provide a tight integration with SAP APIs and services for consuming different business APIs from the SAP environments, and also, of course, afterwards, the deployment of the application to the SAP target systems. Let's talk a little bit about the maturity of SAP Business Application Studio. It was released over 2 years ago. It is highly adopted by SAP customers and also thousands of internal SAP developers. When we look on the key offering of the high productivity tools in SAP Business Application Studio, so it starts with a simplified UI. Whenever the developer logs in to Business Application Studio, he'll see the simplified UI at first. So the ramp up into the environment is much easier. And of course, later on, the developer can easily add additional complexity and tools for his, according to his skill set and needs. Second of all, we provide a semantic view of the application. So developers should not mess up with the files and folders of the application. The developer can easily find the different business components of the application, like the different database elements, the different services, the different UI components, for the easy navigation and creation of the business elements of the application. We provide also guidance for development tasks with the guided development tool in Business Application Studio, a one-click preview and a deployment experience, graphical data and application modelers for easy navigation through the different components of the application. And the last is the service center I mentioned before for browsing and consuming of SAP Business APIs. Now let's talk a little bit about the use case of development of capital expenditure application in SAP Business Application Studio. For that, I'll do a little bit of role play. I will be playing Johannes. So I'm Johannes. I work for a big enterprise IT department. I'm a professional developer. I have years of experience in ABAP and SAP Fiori application development. I use ABAP development tools, ADT in Eclipse, SAP Web ID, and now also SAP Business Application Studio. My colleague Tim also works together with me. He is a professional developer. He also has years of experience in ABAP and SAP Fiori application development. He has been practicing cloud application development on SAP Business Technology Platform, and he used VS Code and used to work with low-level command line tools. Our boss asked us to develop a new cloud application, the capital expenditure application. It is used to manage capital expenditure requests, which are expenses relevant for the company balance sheet. The end user should be able to view, create, and edit all capital expenditure registration, the related business partners, which should be pulled from the SAP S/4HANA system and categories. In case there is a total expense which is too high, we should indicate that in the UI. The UI itself should be based on SAP Fiori desktop UI, ready for the latest SAP Fiori theme and ready for SAP Fiori Launchpad. And we should provide different authorizations per admin and end user. After a couple of days of ramping myself up with SAP Cloud Application Programming Model tools, I called Tim. I remember him mentioning using new high productivity tools in SAP Business Application Studio that may help me. Tim, can you help me? So in this time, I would like to hand over to my colleague Tim back to run through the demo. Over to you, Tim.
Now let's have a look how to use the high productivity tools in the SAP Business Application Studio to create a capital expenditure, or in short, CapEx application. I'm creating a new business application and I call it CapEx. I'm now taken to the Business Application Studio in order to develop my new application. I first create a new data model. This entity, which I call CapEx, should be part of my form in my UI, where I can enter my CapEx registration. An ID is generated for me, and I take that over. I'm happy with it. I add a description of type string and a total cost of type integer. That's my first entity. Now, my UI also should include a category for my CapEx registration. And this category should have a fixed number of values. For this, I create a new entity. I call it category. This time, I'm changing the ID to have an integer as a data type. And I'm adding a name property, which is a string. Now I need to connect the two. I create a relationship from the CapEx entity to the category entity. The system suggests a relationship of type one-to-one association, and that's exactly what I need here. I also like the suggested property name category, and I take it all over. Now let's go back to the home page. We also want the business partner to be connected to each CapEx registration. The business partner, though, resides in an S/4HANA Cloud backend system, and we need to connect to it via an API. So I'm pressing the external data model. I see SAP backend systems, and I see one of them is an S/4HANA system. I also see some APIs that an administrator has exposed. One of them is the Business Partner API. I can now have a look at the API and explore it a bit. I find that this is the one that I want to use and press Add Data Model. And the data model of the API is taken over into my application. It's quite a huge one. The business partner in the S4 backend has 43 entities. Now I'm going back to CAPEX. And like with the category, I create a new relationship. This time I have to select one of the many entities of the business partner API and I choose the plain business partner one. I make the property name a bit nicer and create a new relationship. And there you go, you see the whole data model. And you can see that the business partner has quite a lot of properties. Now we can create some sample data. We can do this, for example, for category. Remember, there should be a fixed number of values for the category. So let's create 3. We can now also add sample data for the business partner, just in case, while developing, we don't always want to have to call the S/4HANA backend system. So for this, we can use some mock data. So this time, let's generate some mock data for exactly 4 business partners. System generates it for me, I'm fine with that. And that concludes the sample data. Now we have a data model and some data representing what we will have on the database. We now need to define what our consumers will see from that data, and that's going to be via a service which will be our API. And for that we need to specify how our database is going to be exposed, in what way. So first let's create a service entity for CAPEX, and we're going to expose CAPEX one by one. We make this service entity draft enabled, meaning that users can save data in an unfinished form without other users seeing the result before the form entry is completely finished. Then we add another entity, which is of course our category. Also the category we take over as is. Last but not least, we will add the business partner. This time we change the name of the entity and we select only some of the properties of the data model to be exposed because there are far too many for our consumers to see. We're just taking over the first name, the last name and the business partner ID and get a nice overall service. Now that concludes the creation of our backend service. We've now got a full-blown OData service already, which is based on the Cloud Application Programming Model CAP. However, that this is CAP is just background information at the moment, not needed now. Now let's create a new user interface. We're going to change the name because it should be a CAPEX application. We're going to choose one of 2 UI types. On the right hand side, we rather see a mobile first application based on MDK, which also works on a desktop, but it's mobile first. On the left hand side, we see a desktop first application based on the Fiori Elements framework. This is also responsive like MDK, and it works therefore on desktop and mobile. However, it is optimized for desktop. For our application, we choose a template for a list report and an object page. We also choose CAPEX as the leading entity for the application. Now in the back, a new application, a new UI application for me is generated that I could immediately use. However, we'll make some adjustments to it. We have to wait until the generation of the UI application is finished. Now the so-called page map is opened. And we see there are already 2 pages. One is the list report. Let's have a look at the list report. So that's the original list of CAPEX registrations. We see all the columns are generated, apart from the CAPEX ID, which was not automatically included because no one wants to see a GUID on a UI. But we can see there's already the category in it, which doesn't have a nice label. So let's change the label. And let's make sure that we see the category name here and not the ID. Let's go to the business partner, where the label is also not nice. It will show the business partner ID, that's fine for us. That concludes what we do on the list. Let's go to the object page and have a look at it as well. We see that the fields that are generated from the CAPEX entity into the form are the same as in the list. And again, we don't like the label for the category, but this time we want to have something else. We want the user to see a drop-down list box when they change an entry on the UI. So we want the user to see the name of the category, and we just want to see the name, not the name and the ID or just the ID. We just want to see the name. Let's apply this. Let's also make sure that the selected category name from the drop-down is shown in its input field. Now let's go to the business partner. Once again, we change the label, and also in this case, we want a value help for the business partner for the user to select. This time, however, we cannot work with a drop-down because there might be millions of business partners in the backend. So we have to choose a normal value help. And this value help, we want to see a list of the first and the last name to make it easier for us to select the business partner. We apply this, and now we're actually finished and we can run the application. For this we have a preview. The preview could be with sample data, so it's not going to the backend, and in the first instance, let's try that out. We see our service that we could explore, but let's directly go into the application that we built on top of the service. So we see a list of CAPEX. There is nothing there because we have no sample data for CAPEX, remember? But we can create a new CAPEX entry now. So we see the category, we see the drop-down list box that we wanted, and we see a value help for the business partner. Because we chose to preview sample data, we see the sample data for the business partner. And we can have a description and a total cost. And we can go back to the list and see the entry in the list. Now let's stop the preview. Let's say, okay, this is nice, but now I want to have some bit of business logic to be added. So far you've not seen any code, but be aware that in the background we created a normal CAP project and the Fiori Elements application in this case. And we can actually see the files of the project that a developer could have written with simple text editors in the same way, instead of using the visual tools that you've seen so far in this demo. So let's have a look at the generated code. We can open the File Explorer and can see that there is a normal project with files for CAP and Fiori Elements here. And we see all the entities that are created, and the developer could now choose to just work on these files. We want to add some business logic. And in CAP, one way of adding business logic is by adding a JavaScript file that is called like the file that contains the service. Here it is the service CDS file. Now we add a new file called service.js, where JS is for JavaScript. And in this JavaScript file, we will add some prepared code. Let's have a look at that code. That's Cloud Application Programming Model code for a handler here that a professional developer knows. So there is a handler that's called on read of the CAPEX entity, and then we do something with it. Well, what do we do with it? We actually have a look at what the total cost is, and then we change a property called criticality. However, the property criticality doesn't yet exist in our CAPEX data model. We need to add it still. So let's close all this and add a criticality to our data model. And let's make that an integer. So the changed data model will already be reflected in the service. Now let's get back to our Fiori application and introduce the new criticality property there. Let's go into the list, which contains the original columns from CAPEX. Now let's pick the total cost column. In our new application logic, we have introduced code that when total cost is greater than 200, the criticality becomes 1 instead of 2. We can use this to change the visual representation of the total cost on the screen. Fiori Elements has a functionality called criticality to do so. You can bind this to a property in the data model, in our case also called criticality. We called the property to have the same name as the functionality. It could have any other name though. We can now say how the criticality will be represented on the UI. Apart from a color change, we can have icons. Let's now check the new application. This time let's choose live data and get the business partners from the S4 backend and not from our sample data. Again, we get into our overview page. We can start our application. Let's create a new CapEx entry. Now let's have a look at the business partner. The business partner now is retrieved from the backend. There are a lot of business partners, as you can see from the scroll bar. We can use the standard functionality to filter and find certain business partners, and we take one over. Let's have the first total cost of 100 and a description. Now let's create this new entry and let's go back to our list. Now you can see total cost has a different color and an icon representing a criticality of 2 because the total cost is less than 200. Now let's create a new entry with another business partner, and now let's make the total cost 400 and call it test 2. Let's create it. Let's go back. Now you can see that the new entry has yet another color and icon, because here the total cost is more than the 200 defined in our application logic code, and therefore the criticality turned into 1. Let's go back one more time and have a look at the code. If it's above 200, criticality is 1. If it's below, it's 2. And that's actually what we see reflected in the application. And that concludes our demo.
Thank you, Tim, for the nice demo. So I invite you all to get started today, join our community, and of course, read through the extensive product documentation. With SAP TechEd, you can learn more about application development in SAP BTP on the different lectures, virtual workshops, breakout sessions, and in-person workshops. You can also expand your expertise with different learning journeys in SAP BTP. Check out learning.sap.com/teched for that. And with that, I would like to thank you all. I was Yuval Anafi and my colleague Tim Back running through the demo. Of course, you're all welcome to contact us through the emails address here. Thank you all and have a good day.